both before and shortly after the 370-page bipartisan but relatively quite conservative Senate border bill dropped, MAGA Republicans in the House of Representatives publicly condemned the bill long before they had any chance to read it. And it's so bad that even Fox News hosts are publicly calling these bad faith MAGA Republicans out for their reluctance to do anything about the border despite actively complaining about it. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert buttons before you go. I'd greatly appreciate it. All right, friends, we have several clips to play in this video, but again, this is what's going on. This is the dominant news. Republicans have been complaining about the situation at the southern border. President Biden's policies, manpower, and resources are pretty commensurate with those under the Trump administration. And yet, Republicans will not pass President Biden's comprehensive immigration reform and border bill, which he, proposed, I think, his second day in office. And when the Senate worked in good faith with Republicans and Democrats to try to pass something to address the crisis that MAGA Republicans won't shut up about, MAGA Republicans realized once they got close to consensus that, oh my God, if we pass something, this will rob us of a wedge issue during an election year, and Donald Trump needs it if he has any chance of beating President Biden in the election. But again, Fox News hosts, at least some of them, are starting to at least publicly acknowledge the grift here and call out certain outspoken MAGA Republicans for their refusal to engage in good faith. So we're going to play a couple of clips here and unpack it together.
Say to the American people about that.
Well, I find it very ironic, Senator Langford's comments there, because this bill keeps the border wide open. There are so many loopholes in this bill, it'll make your head spin. And any Republican that supports it supports open borders, because it's going to allow Secretary Mayorkas to have full discretion on who comes in above that 5,000 limit. It lowers the standard for those that are seeking asylum. And look, the American people are tired of being an ATM machine for the illegal aliens that are coming across our border every single day. And the more that I read language in this bill, the more frustrated I get with it, because it's not what we're being sold.
I think we're all trying to figure out this bill. Have you read all 370 pages of this bill?
We are working through it. We have about 50 pages more to go. But from what we can tell, and I'm going to put forth a statement once we finish reading the bill, the measures that we feel are extremely undesirable, that keep our border open, that water down the asylum system. It's not good for the country,
well, they say
quite
exactly
frankly.
The opposite. That's why I'm asking, and obviously Senator Langford and his colleagues, worked hard to negotiate something. It's hard to do some actual negotiation, and they say no new asylum claims would be allowed. Anybody crossing would be removed.
Based on
over this Benford. Hold on.
Yeah.
And he said, it ends the whole idea of I made it to U.S. soil and now you have to process me. It increases detention beds, doubles the deportation flights, and adds $650 million to expand the border wall, which is the same language and funding that's in H.R. 2.
H.R. 2 being the very strict House-approved border bill, which was effectively dead on arrival in the Senate, right? So this has much of the same language and many of the same provisions, if not all. So it is a slightly less conservative iteration of H.R. 2. So again, if Republicans were acting in good faith, if they genuinely meant what they said and they believe it was a crisis at the proportion that they've been complaining about it, and they believe that these conservative provisions in H.R. 2 are necessary, then this is something, right? As Martha McCallum pointed out in frustration, listen, there's divided government. She didn't put it quite like this, but the message was clear, which is, again, House Republicans have a 2-seat majority. 2 seats in one chamber. They think they can be the tail that wags the dog. They think they can dictate terms to a Democratic-controlled Senate and a Democratic-controlled White House. It's insane. It's absurd. And even Senate Republicans like Lindsey Graham and James Langford, who are very conservative on the border, have said, listen, this is never going to happen under a Republican president because Democrats would never support something so conservative. There's a chance to do it now because you're constantly complaining about it. So if you mean what you say, let's do it. And again, all the conservative provisions, as she's pointed out, but the telling part for Nancy Mace, as has been the case for all these Republicans, is that they haven't read the damn bill before they came out and voiced their public opposition. And that's how you know they're doing Donald Trump's bidding. But it's not just Nancy Mace, it's other MAGA Republicans as well, and Neil Cavuto, one of the better Fox News anchors who has no problem calling MAGA Republicans out. He grills another House Republican about the incongruity between House Republicans' complaints about the issue and their total unwillingness to work in bipartisan good faith with the other party.
I think you're referring to H.R. 2, and it was your own measure to secure the Border Act. No Democrats voted for it, so that would be dead on arrival, I assume, in the Senate, just as much as this Senate thing is dead on arrival with you guys. But it's something. And isn't the argument, sir, that it's better than nothing? You just don't view that.
No, I mean, why should we automatically, reflexively accept what the Senate sent us? They certainly didn't feel any pressure to take our bill. So if they pass something that addresses our border, maybe we could conference the two. But frankly, their solution basically says, just go ahead and raise the standard to nearly 2 million illegals per year. And fundamentally, nothing about the emergency authority granted by the bill or imposed by the bill is really forces the president to even take action.
Again, is something better than nothing. Yes, this is the whole point of divided government. When you when you don't have the votes to brute force your preferred agenda through, it is better. And I say this again as somebody who is progressive, somebody who wants much more left-leaning policy than we often get. But if it's a choice between no movement left or if that's the only option, then at least let's have some movement left. If the choice is no movement left or some movement left, let's do some movement left, right? With the Republicans, it should be the same calculus, at least, again, if they're interested in operating in good faith and governing in good faith. If it's a choice between nothing and something, because everything that they want is off the table, then they should choose something, right? But again, what House Republicans are trying to pin their hopes on, at least publicly, is impeaching Alejandro Mayorkas, the Secretary of Homeland Security. But Neil Cavuto pokes a hole in that very irritably, but very accurately.
Lock in zero. That's the right standard.
But if we don't lock in anything, and I understand what you're saying, and your colleagues have been saying that the president has, with just the flick of a pen, he can undo a lot of this, but he's not undoing a lot of it, and he's not undoing a lot of the things that you said happened under Donald Trump. This forces him into some position, weak as maybe you argue it is, and sets the stage for a Republican president, if that's the case, who comes in and then goes even further. In that gap, then, sir, you don't have anything getting done.
Oh, well, what's going to happen is Mayorkas is going to be impeached. He's earned it. He's violating the law. He's refusing to enforce it.
He is not going to be impeached.
He is going to be impeached by the House.
I know that, but
we can't control the Senate.
He's not going to lose his job.
Well, maybe not, but he should, and so should Joe Biden. And so all we can do is make the case to the American people and ask them to send
all they care about are political stunts, right? And by the way, it's not guaranteed that they will be able to successfully impeach Secretary Mayorkas. Ken Buck, a far-right member of the Freedom Caucus from Colorado, has publicly said he will not vote to impeach Secretary Mayorkas. Many conservative legal scholars and so-called constitutional experts, to which Republicans and Fox News constantly defer, like Jonathan Turley, said that there's no good faith cognizable case here to impeach the Secretary of Homeland Security. So when you factor all these things in and also consider that there are 18 Republicans in the House of Representatives that live in swing district or were elected in swing districts that also voted for President Biden, these people are incredibly vulnerable. So they may not take the risk for an impeachment, which will die in the Senate, because you need 2/3 of the Senate to vote to impeach Secretary Mayorkas. That's definitely not going to happen. And then President Biden can say, hey, listen, I offered to give them a conservative, relatively conservative, bipartisan bill to address this crisis that they won't shut up about. They refuse to take it up because they say it's all or nothing, even though they're not in a position to dictate those terms. And then instead, they wasted political capital on a bogus impeachment that even their own experts say is nonsense. And then it died in the Senate. So, folks, it's like this crisis that they're coming to you complaining about, we had an opportunity to meaningfully address it. Not only did they choose not to do that, they chose to do something completely irrelevant, which also failed. That's a pretty persuasive case if the president and the Democrats attempt to make it. So I don't know where their confidence it comes from, but to me, it says something that even Fox News hosts like Martha McCallum and Neil Cavuto, who are conservative-leaning at the absolute most generous, right? And certainly Martha McCallum, I think, is as relatively MAGA as it gets. I think she was one of the co-hosts along with Brett Baer, the softball town hall debate hosts for Donald Trump just a couple of months ago, even they're getting frustrated. You can hear it in their tone of voice and you can see it on their face. Like, you haven't even read the bill. You have such a strong opinion about it. You won't work in good faith at all. You're not in a position to dictate terms. You've been telling us all, gassing us up that it's a crisis, and you won't do anything about it. Really? Make it make sense. But of course they can't, because at the end of the day, this is a fact. House Republicans and the Republican Party in general suck. They just objectively suck, and they're inferior at governing. It's reflected in the record, in the rhetoric, and the policies. They're terrible at it. They're hoping that they can use this as a wedge issue to manipulate Americans into voting for them, and that they're not obligated to actually do anything about the crisis or about any issues whatsoever. It's good that they're getting pushback from their otherwise safe spaces like Fox News. And those of us who have the power to vote should also put them on the record, should also put them on blast by saying, listen, we're not going to vote for you. You should not vote for a Republican. Punish Republicans the only way you have the power to do so, which is at the ballot box. Make them lose election after election after election until they course correct and become a good faith oppositional party. It's probably not going to happen. It's just my opinion. You let me know what you think in the comments.